All right, so now we're going to look at something called the layer mask. So a layer mask is I feel like I keep saying these are all really powerful tools because they really are. So down here in the layer palette, what you're going to see is you have all these options. And we've gone over a new layer, we've gone over group. This one will go over next level. This one is the one we're looking at now. If you hover over it, you'll notice it says add layer mask. So a layer mask can be a really useful thing. So I'm going to click on this image and you'll see that it's here. And so layer mask works with all of those selection tools we went over. So I am going to use that quick selection tool that we worked on last time, and I'm going to decrease my brush size. And the brush size for the selection tool also works on the keyboard shortcuts to make it larger or smaller, like with the regular brush. And so as I paint and I want to select this, and let's say that I want to cut out this flower. So now I've selected it and I've got a little bit of stuff in here, which we can deal with. And I've got a little bit there, so I'm going to add a little bit to that, make that brush kind of small, and get that in there. And I'm going to do the minus bit, and go down there. Okay, so that looks like it's pretty good. Now that I have this selection, say that I want to cut this out. There is an eraser tool. I highly recommend you never use it for the most part because of layer masks. So I'm going to go over here to the new tool. We still got the selection going, and with this selected, if I come over to the layer palettes and I'm on the layer that I want to cut out, if I press this button here to add a layer mask, it magically gets rid of the other thing, but it doesn't delete it. It allows me to make some adjustments, and you'll notice that it creates this new thing. So it has this link, so it means that these two are locked together. And the black area on this, and if I press Alt and click on it, you'll see it's created a layer where you've got white and you've got black. And the black is covered up. It doesn't let it show. It's called a mask. It masks it. The white is what shows through. So if I click back on this image, you'll notice that that's what's happening. So let's say the great thing about this is this is not such a great tool and stuff and things, and it's got some weird edges and I'm not too happy with it. So with this, using the brush tool, and if I'm selected on the layer mask, I make sure that it's highlighted. You'll see those little brackets around it, not on the image itself, but on the mask. And you'll notice that my colors turn to black and white because I can only use grayscale on this. If I wanted to change that, take my brush, and the brush actually matters, so I'm going to do a soft brush because I want to do some interesting effects. So what I can do here, so I'm going to do this, and I'm going to take my opacity down, okay, and if I just, so I've got black and it's covering it up, so if I undo that, let's go the opposite direction. I'm going to switch to white, because white's what shows through. You'll notice that I get just a slight hint of it because it's starting to show through because it's not perfectly black. So I'm going to reduce my brush size a little bit. Make that effect even more pronounced, and I can see more of that background. Or let's say that I wanted to change something different. It's like the selection tools aren't really helping me out, and I want to be a little more specific or a little more organic with it. And so what I can do is if I take the white exactly and get down, and I'm going to make this 100% full opacity, you'll notice that I can paint in that image, or do the opposite direction. If you hit X on the keyboard, it switches between these. That's a keyboard shortcut to switch between those colors. I am going to paint back in, and it's going to completely, and if I messed up, I can undo, but I can also just switch colors and go back to white and paint it back in. So this becomes really useful for complicated selections and trying to hide stuff. Layer mask means you can blend stuff in, so let's go to this selection tool we have here. So let's say that I wanted to have her in the image. I could also use a layer mask, collect on there, create a layer mask, and now I can paint black to cover it up and say I want to kind of blend those images together. See how it looks like it's almost one single image. That's really useful with layer mask. Now I'm going to show you one other thing that's really great for cutting out. There's one more tool, and this is part of the selection, And I'm going to go ahead, and you can delete these. You don't like them? Great. Click on it. Click the trash tool. It's going to say, do you want to apply it? No, we don't want to apply it. If we apply it, it's going to get rid of the tool and it's going to delete those pixels. So we're going to delete it without that. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. So get rid of the layer mask. Make sure you're on the layer mask selected, okay, and delete. So now I'm going to turn that off. So lots of times we want to cut people out of images. So I'm going to actually, with one of these selections, so I'm going to choose that quick selection tool. You see this thing that says select and mask. This is really useful. I'm going to click on it. Whole new dialog comes up. Now, in view mode, I can have lots of different options of how I can view this. Usually it defaults to on layers or something, I'm not quite sure. I like to put it on overlay. So the red is the mask, okay? Right now it's going to mask everything, but I have all these different options here. So I am going to try to pull her out of the image. And these work just like the quick selection tools. So I have her, and you see how it's starting to say that's what's going to show through. And it's fairly quick. It's kind of intensive for the processor. So be patient if it takes a little longer. Now you'll notice that it grabbed part of that side over here. So this is also cut. So I'm going to switch that to the minus. And I'm going to add that back in. There we go. But now there's a great thing that now happens. Because this is really useful for hair. Because you'll notice that our hair is not necessary. So I'm going to zoom in. This is Control plus. And if I press the space bar, I go to this little hand tool that helps move it around. But you'll notice I'm missing some of her hair here. So with this tool, it looks kind of like hair underneath there. I'll make this a little bit smaller. What it does is it figures out that this is hair that needs to be figured out. So you'll notice that it's going to get rid of some of those images in there. It's going to figure that out and try to make it look more natural. Because lots of times if you try to do this selection without this, hair ends up looking strange and it doesn't cut out the background well. And what it's doing is it's figuring out that there is hair in there and it wants to actually find which pixels are good. So now I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. Use the regular selection tool so that I can grab a little bit, because it grabbed a little bit of her shoulder. Add some more of that in. There we go. Now I'm going to go back to that hairbrush for just a second. Say, hey, be a little better with that. So if I do, I'm going to zoom it out again. Now that I'm done, I can also sort of like, there's some options in here that sort of smooths out my selection. I'm going to do just a little bit of that. I'm going to feather it just a tiny bit, and feathering just means it sort of like fades out the selection. And I'm going to go about maybe 1 pixel. And I'm going to shift the edge a little bit, like 1%. And I'm going to click this decontaminate color so it gets rid of the background color. And if you see output to new layer with mask, you have lots of different options, but new layer with mask is probably one of your best. Because now we're going to do this and we're going to click OK. And you'll see, now we lost a little of that, but that is a much better cutout than what we could have done without that tool. And you'll notice what it's done is create a brand new, it copied the layer and then it added a layer mask to it. All right, so that's selection tools with layer mask. It is extremely useful, especially when you're combining stuff, and for graphic design where we want to like have text that comes behind her, because now let's say that I have this tool here and I bring her up above that. She is now over top of that. You see how nice that works? And now I can even, if I put a layer mask on that, and I've got this green background there's on, if I put a layer mask on here, okay, I can use the gradient tool, okay, and if I come up here and I've got the gradient options, there's one that's got transparency, which allows it to build up. I can blend all of this together. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the flower layer, and I'm going to make sure I'm on a layer mask, and I am going to get rid of that hard line. And see, we've now created, using layer mask, an ability to blend all these images together. So that's selection tool, that's layer mask, that's select with layer mask. Enjoy, have fun.